Welcome to Jazz Piano Skills. I'm Dr. Bob Lawrence. It's time to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. I hope everyone is remaining safe and healthy. Happy to report that we are taking the first steps, although they're baby steps, we're taking the first steps to returning life to normal here in the North Texas area. Some of the local businesses here in Dallas are starting to reopen, and we're starting to see some signs of life in our city and in our neighborhoods. I understand that we are definitely not out of the woods, no doubt about that, but nevertheless, it is comforting to feel once again a slight community heartbeat. And with that being said, I am hoping that the doors of the Dallas School of Music will be opening soon. I believe we are shooting for the start of May, somewhere in there, for a reopening. And I know a lot can happen between now and then, but I must say it will be awesome to see all of our families and students again. It will be great to hear music flooding the hallways again. I cannot wait. Last week's podcast episode jumped into how to begin developing inside-outside melodic lines using harmonic shapes as our foundation. No doubt, big-time stuff. This week, we are going to continue that journey. However, we are going to go backwards in order to catapult forward. So let me explain. I often, when teaching, and my students will attest to this, I like to jump into the deep end right away when introducing a new musical skill, a jazz piano skill. And in doing so, it establishes a larger picture of the skill right from the start. And having a bigger picture of a specific skill, I believe, is what ultimately motivates us as learners to strive towards acquiring a command of the skill, which of course is necessary if we ever hope to incorporate that skill into our playing. Now, the downside is that the initially bigger picture introduction of a jazz piano skill can cause some confusion, some frustration, and oftentimes a feeling of hopelessness. So that is why after I push you into the deep end, I will always pull you out and then lead you to shallower waters. In doing so, it helps you put into focus that bigger picture that I initially introduced you to. And that is why this lesson is one of the backwards/forwards lessons. We're going to take a few steps back this week with regards to inside-outside playing to catapult you forward. But before we start the lesson, I have some quick announcements. First of all, don't forget, Course 5 is now available at JazzPianoSkills.com. This is a fantastic course dealing specifically with the 11th sound. The course is a mental, physical, and oral workout using scales and arpeggios to help you thoroughly explore and digest the 11th sound. And we do so using major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished chords. I will share more information with you about the course and with all my Jazz Piano Skills courses at the end of this podcast episode. I also want to remind you that there is a supplemental educational guide available for this podcast. I do a guide for every podcast episode. So that way, those of you who like to see the jazz piano skill mapped out using traditional music notation, you can certainly do so. And those podcast guides are available at JazzPianoSkills.com. Just simply go to the site, In the menu bar that runs across the top of the page, you'll see a link for podcast. Click on that podcast link, and it will take you to the page where all the podcast episodes are listed. And next to those podcast episodes are the educational supplemental guides that you can download. These guides are a fantastic resource to have at your side, at your fingertips, sitting on the piano while you're practicing. So I encourage you to check it out and to certainly take advantage of the guides if you find that type of resource is going to be beneficial for you, which I can't imagine why it would not. And also, don't forget about the forums, the Jazz Piano Skills forums that are out there, live and ready for action. There is a forum that is specifically put together for each Jazz Piano Skills podcast episode and for each Jazz Piano Skills course. So it allows you to zero in right away, ask any questions regarding any of the topics or any of the lessons that you are studying or listening to, and you can get help from other members within the Jazz Piano Skills community. And of course, I will chime in as well. And in fact, we're actually going to use a question from the Jazz Piano Skills forum that was submitted this week, kind of as our introduction to today's lesson. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I want to stress, as I always do, that regardless of where you are in your jazz journey, a beginner, an intermediate player, an advanced player, or even if you're an experienced professional, you will find this podcast, this lesson, to be beneficial. And this week we are exploring once again inside-outside playing, part 2. And in this lesson, you are going to discover classic inside-outside improvisation techniques. You're going to learn how to use triad pairs to create intentional tension. Let me say that again. You're going to learn how to use triad pairs to create intentional tension when improvising. And you are going to play a combo of minor triad pairs using root position and inversions to move inside and outside of the harmony. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to use a question that was posted in the Jazz Piano Skills forums this past week in relation to last week's podcast episode as a launching pad into our lesson for this week. This question is from Mike. Mike, great to hear from you. And Mike's question has 3 parts. His question is actually 3 questions. And here they are. Number 1, for every chord in the inside notes, are the outside notes always the notes a half step up? Good question. Question number 2, playing the minor voicing for the inside notes, when playing the outside notes against that chord, is not pleasing to my ears. Should I play the minor voicing for the outside notes when playing the outside notes? Another great question. And number 3, playing the inside notes followed by the outside notes and resolving back to the inside notes reminds me of the 2-5-1 work we did where we resolved to the major key, the 1 chord, in an earlier podcast lesson. Any connection? Great observation, Mike. So let me take those 3 questions and answer them, not just for Mike, but for everyone as well, because I am sure that many of you have the exact same questions. So question 1, for every chord in the inside notes, are the outside notes always the notes a half step up? Well, what I wrote back to Mike was this. Playing notes that are outside of the harmony can be built using shapes other than minor shapes a half step up. And again, minor shapes because we're dealing with a minor sound, right? In fact, we will be exploring the shape a half step down in this podcast lesson. Outside shapes, however, can be a major third away, an augmented fourth away, and so on. I personally like to introduce inside and outside playing using shapes a half step away because it's easier to think of and it's easier to quickly see. Now, question number 2 was playing the minor voicings for the inside notes when playing the outside notes against that chord is not pleasing to my ears. Should I play the minor voicings for the outside notes when playing the outside notes? Again, great question. Here's what I wrote back to Mike. I totally get the outside notes not being pleasing to the ears, at least initially. However, keep in mind that we are experimenting with these shapes using a stationary sound. In other words, right, we're just sitting on C minor. And that minor chord is not resolving anywhere. It's not going to a 5 chord. It's not going to a 1 chord. It's not going anywhere. So when we practice a skill like inside, outside playing, using a stationary sound like minor, keep in mind that we are hearing this tension out of a typical real-life musical context. And this can be rough on the ears initially for sure, but don't panic. The ears will start to come around and do so rather quickly, especially when you resolve the inside-outside lines to a 5 chord and then follow the 5 chord with a 1 chord, the classic 2-5-1 progression. Once we begin moving the tension forward to another harmonic sound, your ears will love it. Now, the second part of that question was, should I play the minor voicings for the outside notes when playing the outside notes? I responded to Mike and I said, listen, you indeed can shift the harmonic shape in your left hand to match the melodic shape you are playing with your right hand. It takes away a little of the bite, but you certainly can implement that effect as well. Keep in mind, if playing with a trio, your bass player may continue to walk a C minor bass line as you slide outside of the harmony with your voicing and melody, which is totally fine, and it will sound great. On the other hand, your bass player may actually hear your harmonic movement and move with you as well. And this too sounds great. In Mike's final question, playing the inside notes followed by the outside notes and resolving back to the inside notes reminds me of the 2-5-1 work we did where we resolved to the major key, to the 1 chord. In any connection? And this is in reference to a previous podcast episode. And I said to Mike, hey, fantastic observation regarding the connection to the 2-5-1 work we did earlier. In that lesson, we used lower neighboring tones only to create just a little tension as we moved through the 2-5-1 progression. You will soon see in upcoming podcast episodes and lessons how insightful your observation is and that it connects the dots that we are currently exploring. See, isn't this fantastic? This is all taking place within the JazzPianoSkills forums. So get out there and start becoming active in the forums and don't miss out on some great information being shared back and forth. So Mike ends his question with, great podcast again. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. He says, mentally stimulating, and it wears me out physically. Fantastic, right? That's my goal. You know, these skills, they should wear you out mentally and they should wear you out physically. That means you're working. You're striving to get better as a jazz pianist. So there's meat on the bones, in other words, right? And that's what I want these lessons to be. I want these to be meaty lessons that you can go back and listen to and re-listen to and study, continually study to help you get better as a jazz pianist. Now, those questions by Mike and my answers actually should help make it easier for you to wrap your mind, hands, and ears around today's lesson. And as I mentioned earlier, help you bring into focus the bigger picture that I introduced to you last week regarding the playing of inside and outside harmony and melody. So today we are going to stay with the C minor sound, and we will use a minor triad, a half step up like we did last week, but we are also going to now incorporate a half step down to create some additional tension. And again, we are going to take harmonic shapes first and then turn those shapes into melody. Remember, we are trying to take a solid and turn it into a liquid. So let's get busy. Let's discover, learn, and play inside, outside, part 2, harmony and melody. So sit back, relax, turn on your ears. Here we go. Okay, quick review. We're dealing with C minor. And so the C minor scale consists of 7 notes: C, D, E flat, F, G, A, and B flat, which is the Dorian mode for all you academic folks out there. C minor scale, or the B flat major scale starting on C. Seven notes. So if a scale has 7 notes that are inside the harmony, that means there are 5 notes that fall outside the harmony. So in this case, the 5 notes that fall outside the C minor harmony or C minor scale: C sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, and B, which is actually the C sharp minor pentatonic scale. So we have 7 notes that are inside, and we have 5 notes that are outside. Today we are going to focus on everything centering around the root, right, of C minor. So we're going to center around the C minor triad: C, E flat, G. And we are going to incorporate the outside notes a half step above using the C sharp minor triad. So we have inside, we have a half step up outside. We're also going to have inside again, and we're going to actually descend a half step to B minor, which has the B, D, F sharp, right? So you have actually 2 outside notes in that triad shape, the B and the F sharp. And the D, the third of that B minor triad, is actually the 9th of C minor, so it's inside. So we have C minor, slide down a half step to B minor for outside, slide back to C minor for inside. Okay? So we have 2 triad pairs: C minor to C sharp and C minor to B minor. So this is what I was talking about earlier. It's easier when you start playing inside and outside to start with shapes that are a half step away from your target shape or your inside shape, which is, in this case, C minor triad. So in this very first demonstration, we are going to start with our harmonic shapes. So you're going to hear me play C minor triad. You're going to hear me slide up to the C sharp minor. You're going to hear me come back to my C minor. Then you're going to hear me go C minor again. You're going to hear me slide down to the B minor and then slide right back to the C minor. And I'm going to do that several times because I'm digesting those shapes and those sounds, right? I'm digesting them mentally, conceptually. I'm digesting them physically, my hands, and I'm digesting them orally with my ears. So you're going to hear me repeat those shapes several times with the rhythm section playing underneath me. Then you're going to hear me simply turn those harmonic shapes into melody. You're going to hear me take the solid and turn it into a liquid. So instead of this, you're going to start hearing C minor to C sharp, resolving back to C minor. Then you're going to hear me do C minor starting at the top of C minor on the fifth, and then F sharp, go to F sharp for my B minor, back to C. So ascending to the C sharp minor, and now descending to the B minor. And that's it. And you're going to hear me, when doing that, focusing on playing with a great jazz feel, great time, great articulation. I'm not doing anything fancy. Again, I'm trying to just get these shapes and sounds in my mind, in my hands, and in my ears. So let's take a listen. Here we go. Then we'll talk about it. Pretty cool, right? Now, this should feel a lot easier and a lot simpler than what we were doing last week with all our combinations of ascending and descending motion using root position triads and first and second inversion triads, right? When doing so, that opens up the possibility of the melodic ideas and shapes and lines that we can develop. However, I want to step back now and kind of simplify the process for you. We're going to keep things in root position like we were doing, like we just did, right? Going up and then just coming down that root position triad. So you can start to see again, see these shapes, feel these shapes, hear these shapes. So we're simplifying the process today to help you really start developing a command for this jazz piano skill of playing inside and outside. So now let's go to demonstration number 2 where we're going to use the exact same triad pairs, C minor, C sharp minor, C minor, and B minor. But now we're going to play everything, every triad in first inversion. So you're going to hear me play C minor in first inversion, go up to C sharp minor in first inversion, back to C minor. Then you're going to hear me go C minor, slide down to B minor in first inversion, and slide right back to C minor in first inversion. Okay? And you'll hear me play those shapes again, harmonic shapes, several times. And now down to B minor. And then you're going to hear me take those solids and turn them into a liquid. So you're going to get, right? So I went C minor, C sharp minor, back to C minor. Now you're going to hear the descending side of those shapes. C minor, B minor, C minor. Again, C minor, B minor, C minor. All right? Keeping things simple. Everything, all triads, each triad pair in first inversion. Some ascending motion, some descending motion. So let's take a listen. Let's bring in our rhythm section and hear how these shapes sound. Here we go. Wow, great shapes, right? Great shapes, great sounds. It's amazing, right? Same triads, C minor, C sharp minor, C minor, B minor, but just inverting them gives us a whole different timbre, right? A whole different sound, even though they're the exact same triads. So now you know what's coming next, right? We're going to take those same triad pairs, C minor, C sharp minor, C minor, B minor. Now we're going to move those triads into second inversion. So you're going to have C minor, G, C, E flat. It's going to slide up to C sharp minor, and then slide right back to C minor. Then we're going to take our C minor, second inversion, slide down to B minor, second inversion, and slide right back to C minor. Same exact triad pairs. Then we're going to turn those triad pairs, those solids again, into liquid. So you're going to get C minor, sliding up to C sharp minor. Then we're going to descend C minor, slide down to B minor, and then resolve it back to C minor. So, nice. Nice. So now, let's bring our rhythm section back in. let's see how these shapes sound when placed into a musical context. So here we go. Let's check it out. So there you have it, right? 3 different formulas, 3 different ways to practice triad pairs for inside-outside harmony, right? Number 1, root position, slide up to the minor, half step above, slide right back down. Start on that minor and root position, slide down a half step, slide right back. Take the same thinking, move it to first inversion. Minor triad, first inversion, slide up a half step to minor triad, first inversion, slide back. Start on that minor triad and first inversion, slide down a half step to minor in first inversion and slide right back. And the third way, minor in second inversion, slide up to minor, slide right back down. Again, minor in second inversion, slide down a half step, slide right back. Right? Pretty easy to wrap your mind around. And now what you need to do is take those sounds, those shapes and sounds, and move them to F minor, B flat minor, E flat minor, and so on. Again, if you want to see these mapped out using musical notation, get the JazzPianoSkills guide that goes along with this podcast. You'll love it, and you can sit right on the piano right in front of you and help kind of keep you focused and centered on what you're doing as you're moving these shapes and sounds around inside and outside. Definitely worth having in your educational library. Okay, so now I'm going to do something a little different. I'm actually going to illustrate. I'm going to practice. I'm going to actually practice for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of these shapes and sounds, right? I'm going to start with root position, the very first demonstration I did. And I'm going to just practice improvising using those shapes. So kind of just give you a little window into, if I sit down to practice this inside-outside concept, here's what you would hear. If you were a fly on the wall in my office or at home, and you were checking me out, watching me practice these inside-outside concepts, this is what you would hear. So let me practice, and then we'll talk about it, okay? So I'm going to be using, again, the shapes in root position. C minor, slide up to C sharp minor, C minor, slide down to B minor. And I'm going to just explore those ideas and try to come up with some vocabulary and some things that sound good using those inside-outside combinations. Here we go. Wow, that's a lot of fun. What do you think? You see, I'm just trying to come up with different rhythmic ideas to apply. Sometimes I wasn't even playing the entire triad. In other words, I'm not trying to improvise by just simply going like this, right? You get the idea, right? That's not the point. That's almost kind of like a little Hannon exercise, right? For those of you that familiar with that, that's like Hannon exercises are what, piano players, learning how to play practice, right? You have exercises like this. I'm sure you've all heard these kind of exercises, right? Right? So they're just little technique exercises and finger exercises. So in a way, what all this is today, that's like a little Hannon exercise. But then when I go to improvise, I try to articulate and create a feel like a jazz pianist. And then I try to change things up rhythmically to come up with some melodic motifs, some ideas. I'm trying to uncover basically my musical ideas. I'm trying to discover me. So now I'm going to practice a little more, but now I'm shifting my attention to the triad pairs in first inversion. So I'm going here, here, C, C sharp minor, and then, right? So let me practice a little bit on those shapes and let me see what I can come up with. And I'm just staying right with those shapes. I'm hovering around those. I might use some chromaticism. Remember a couple of weeks ago I did a podcast lesson episode on using chromaticism. So you might hear some chromaticism going on, but I am staying focused on those shapes as my primary ideas. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Wow. That's fun, man. That's really fun. So I hope that you are practicing in the same type of way, right? Approaching the exploration of any jazz piano skills. But since we're talking, today we're talking inside outside shapes. So I hope you explore this jazz piano skill in the same kind of way, right? Now, let me do one more. I'll go ahead and while I'm having fun here, I'm going to practice using the triads in second inversion. So my C minor, this, right? The C sharp, back to C minor, sliding down the B minor, sliding back up to C minor. So let me dink around with this a little bit and see what ideas I can come up with. Let me have a little fun practicing these shapes, and then we'll go from there. So let's check this out. Now, hey, something that I want to mention, that dawned on me while I was playing. I'm not trying to memorize anything here, right? I'm not trying to find an idea and then memorize it. I might find an idea using those shapes and kind of repeat it, right, several times to kind of help me kind of digest it and live with it a little bit. But I'm not trying to memorize it verbatim and then, drop kick it into a song somewhere. I'm going to let that kind of surface and evolve on its own as I do more and more of this kind of practicing. So I would encourage you when you're doing this, the idea is to explore, to improvise, to be working off some kind of patterns and shapes and seeing what you discover, right? What you discover, what you learn, what you play, and you do that consistently. Then what starts to happen is your vocabulary starts to build and it starts to creep into your playing, right? I always get nervous when people are talking about memorization. I have to memorize this. I'm not a big fan of that. I guess maybe because I was not good at memorization. And then there's always the pressure of having to try to remember it. Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? So what you want to do is just develop vocabulary that your hands and ears are familiar with and go to instinctually when you're playing. And believe me, it happens. So now I'm going to do just one more practice session, right? I just want to kind of open the floodgates and allow myself to explore these shapes and sounds, all three groupings, right? From root position, first inversion, second inversion. I want to just kind of give myself the liberty to kind of slide in and out, move across the keyboard with those different zones and see what I can put together and what I can discover as I'm improvising and playing with those shapes and sounds. So here we go. Let's have some fun and then we'll talk about it. Here we go. Okay. Golly. I'm going to have to stop, right? Otherwise, this podcast is going to be like 3 hours long. So, so much fun. And I'm hoping that you're seeing how to actually take these basic triads, right? Basic C minor triad, and taking the minor shapes a half step above and a half step below to help you begin developing some wonderful jazz vocabulary that utilizes notes that are inside the harmony and notes that are outside the harmony, right? You have to have a balance between tension and resolution and tension, right, in music. Otherwise, if your lines have no tension that resolves, you're kind of going to end up with elevator music, right? So you have to figure out and experiment with incorporating the notes that are outside the harmony with the notes that are inside the harmony, right? They go together. They're not right notes and wrong notes. These are actually notes that we have in our arsenal that we utilize to create interesting and intriguing melodic ideas. So I hope you have found this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson on Inside-Outside Playing, Part 2, to be insightful. And of course, I hope you find it to be beneficial. If you have any questions, a couple things. If you have any questions, of course, the forums are out there for you to post questions like Mike did and get some answers and get some feedback. Always go to the forums. And also, don't forget, I've mentioned the last couple podcasts, I have now incorporated SpeakPipe, which is a widget that is next to my podcast episodes at the Jazz Piano Skills site. If you're listening to this on Spotify or iHeartRadio or Pandora or SoundCloud, the widget's not there. But if you go to Jazz Piano Skills next to the podcast episode, in addition to the podcast guide that you can download, is the SpeakPipe widget. And this widget allows you to quickly send me a voicemail message that's delivered to me via email. I can then listen to your voicemail message and actually send you a SpeakPipe voicemail message right back to your email. And then we can dialogue that way as well. It's fantastic technology. Some of you already are using it, which is great. I love hearing your voices and love engaging and interacting with you. So don't forget, SpeakPipe, the forums, great ways to get assistance and get help with any of these podcast lessons or any of my Jazz Piano Skills courses. Don't forget about the supplemental guides that are out there to help you as well. Those are very easily downloaded and can be sitting on your piano very quickly. The Jazz Piano Skills courses, again, Course 5, the 11th, is now available. Check it out. Very detailed instruction and illustrations in all of my courses, educational talks, interactive learning media, traditional guides and worksheets that you can download, high-definition video demonstrations of me playing all the concepts in all 12 keys, and play-along tracks, lead sheets, professional, personal educational support, and of course, mobile access to all of my courses is easy through your laptop or your desktop computer, your tablet, your phone, your TV, and believe it or not, even your watch. So that's it for now. And until next week, enjoy this amazing journey. And most of all, have fun as you discover, learn, and play jazz piano.